I think we are live.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just going to go through some of the benefits and the options available to yourselves with regards to migration from GP through to Dynamics 365 Business Central. We're going to go through the agenda first, and then we'll go into a product presentation for today.
Cool. Let's bear with me. There we go.
Okay, so these are the introductions for today. We're just going to introduce ourselves. My name is Marco Castagnano, and I've got Ollie Wall along with me today. Just going to go through, as I mentioned there, around Microsoft's GP announcement with regards to GP and the future of that particular product. We're also going to go through some of the benefits of Business Central and a discussion between myself and Oliver there. And we're also going to go into the migration process that we go through with most of our clients. There's a few options available to yourselves, and Ollie's going to talk you through that particular part of the process. Then I'm going to hand back to myself, and I'm going to go through a product presentation of Business Central and show you some of the features and benefits there, some of the interoperability options, and then we're going to round out with a Q&A session at the end. In terms of that Q&A, there are two options with regards to the chat. There's a audience chat and also a Q&A. It's difficult for us to manage both places, so if you could possibly, if you have got any questions, feel free to drop those into the Q&A. Myself and Ollie will run through those at the end, and we'll wrap up the session from there. So just starting on the introductions then. So my name is Marco Castagnano, as the name suggests on there. I'm a solutions consultant. Where I sit is between the sales team and our delivery team. I've a wide range of product knowledge around ERP solutions over the past 9 to 10 years or so, actually. Working with clients of small to medium-sized businesses up through to enterprise-level solutions. And Oliver?
Yep, so my name's Ollie. I'm the BizApps operations team lead here at Advania. Working quite specifically on migrating clients from GP to Business Central, leading up a team of people here around that migration, and worked with numerous GP clients over the last sort of 4 or 5 years to start that journey. So yeah, I'll kick this off with one of the things really that starts a lot of this discussion is Microsoft's announcement around Dynamics GP. So back end of last year, quite a few people are probably aware by now, but Microsoft announced that GP would be going end of product support at the end of December 2029. Now that does seem a long way away, I appreciate, but that is the end of all mainstream support, new features, and this decision was made as part of Microsoft's fairly vocal new strategy, which focused on their cloud-based solutions, such as Dynamics 365. So the announcement had been coming, and Microsoft have sort of now made that official in terms of when that is going end of life. And the solution Microsoft are putting forward for this is Dynamics Business Central, Dynamics 365 Business Central. So that's the solution that Microsoft's suggesting that clients on GP start looking at when they can move across to. And if I flick onto the next slide, we've got some detail here in terms of the exact time frame of that announcement, when that comes into effect for different versions of GP. So it is a time now where GP users need to start thinking around what their plan is for moving off GP eventually. An end of life announcement is a finite date that regulatory things won't come to the product after that. And one of the questions we get asked quite frequently is, does that mean we have to move off GP right now? And the answer to that is no. You're not being forced off Dynamics GP, but it is sensible to start thinking about this, like what are we going to do around that? And Microsoft's suggestion, along with Advania's, is that the obvious solution to move to from Dynamics GP is Business Central. And we're going to go through in that webinar a little bit around why that is and what the benefits are of moving across to Business Central in light of that announcement by Microsoft. So I'll hand back over to Marco to go through a few of the bits around what is Business Central at a holistic level.
Yeah, sure. So from that perspective, obviously Business Central, so obviously not necessarily obvious, Business Central is a cloud-based ERP platform, strategically aimed at that cloud instance. One of the things to note on there is that Business Central is actually an iteration of Nav or Navision or Dynamics Nav. So in terms of the business logic, that's been around for some 20 years now. So it's tried and tested. It's a stable platform the rebrand to Business Central is ultimately to move that to a cloud-first product, and that's where most of our clients do tend to take their implementations these days, and not the traditional server on-site option of legacy. In terms of that, it's been focused with Copilot in mind. So obviously we're moving towards AI. It's always on the tip of everybody's tongue in any conversation. Ultimately, that gives you the ability to analyze your data, review transactions, streamline processes, and gives you a lot of performance benefits internally, frees up time on the mundane tasks, and allows you to focus on some of that more mission critical tasks that you may have to do. In terms of the ecosphere, it's built in the Microsoft Azure space. So there's a interoperability opportunity there to integrate with other applications. And I'm going to talk through some of that as part of the product presentation for today. We also get bi-quarterly updates from Microsoft. So Microsoft take care of all of the major updates. Those updates come in April and in October. And that tends to take care of some of the, key quantum leaps that you may have. Things are changing in Copilot and keeping up with local legislation and what have you. And then also partners like ourselves can also maintain updates as well for more granular level detail things. In terms of the product itself, it's highly configurable, so you can change screens, displays, and I'll show you through some of that as we go through today's demonstration. And we've also got the ability to have Business Central on any type of device. Obviously, in the modern working world, we're both on our laptops, in our home offices, in the physical office, and also out on the road. So we can access Business Central on our mobile phones, our tablets, and that interacts directly live with the database. So as long as we have an internet feed, we can transact with the database from that point of view. So no more going on holiday and not working, unfortunately. Next slide, please, Ollie.
Cool. So I'll pick up this bit around, Marco mentioned there that we have already moved numerous clients from Dynamics GP to Business Central. We're moving some currently. So one of the key questions we get asked is why are customers choosing to move to Business Central from GP? Now, one of the most obvious ones is the cloud first aspect. It's Marco mentioned there around device agnostic. We've moved to a very much remote working world, or an element of our working world is now remote, done by things like Teams. And being cloud first really enables that. You can access it from any device anywhere, providing that your IT allow that. And it does create that you're not reliant on a server via an RDS and logging on that way. You can access it from anywhere, and it's got real with it being cloud first, you are prepared then for future tech. AI Copilot won't be the first time you'll hear that word mentioned, I'd imagine, this week, but that's the big word and the big buzzword around a lot of IT things now, and Business Central is ready for that. With it being cloud first, it can come into the product quite seamlessly. There's no need to upgrade, and enhanced functionality. Business Central has enhanced functionality over Dynamics GP. Dynamics GP was written and incorporated, a long time ago. Business Central has been built based on the Dynamics nav code base, but it's enhanced a lot of that, and they've brought a lot of features into Business Central based on some of the early migrations of clients moving from GP to Business Central around things like statistical accounts didn't exist in Business Central in the early days, and with the need for that, and realized that there's a decent amount of GP customers coming across that wanted that, they added that in, and there's loads of examples of that. And even just this month, there was a big push from the Business Central team at Microsoft N to publish some new Power BI reports into the system that you just get by being on Business Central. There's no additional cost to that. There's no upgrade to that. That sort of just comes. I want to mention sort of built for the future. With it being a cloud-first platform, you benefit from that. So Business Central is available in over 130 countries now, and it's complies with because it's all handled by Microsoft Cloud. It complies with all the security requirements of Microsoft. It's got MFA built into it, and because of that, it really seamlessly integrates with a lot of the Microsoft 365 products. So I mentioned before around Teams, Outlook, but even like the Power Platform stuff around Power Automate, Power Apps, Power BI. We rarely do a project with Business Central now that doesn't have an element of Power BI in it, and it works with all those products seamlessly, with it being Microsoft. It has a mature and customizable API. So again, a lot of our customers are integrating with other third-party platforms, such as like seat booking sites, expense applications, and that's all being done via Business Central's built-in API, which we do have the options to customize as well to make it more fit for purpose. But there's a lot of flexibility around that, and there's a huge amount of third-party applications in Business Central now. I know Marco will go over this a little bit in the demo, but there is. an extension marketplace in Business Central with, lots of third parties, some of which will be familiar names to a lot of people, from people like E1 and Nolan's. They've created a lot of their third parties for Business Central now. Their focus is a lot of it is moving a lot of their GP third parties into Business Central. And that's available via the extension marketplace directly within Business Central, almost like an app store that you see sort of in your mobile phones. There's one of them that exists inside Business Central, which helps you enhance that Business Central implementation that you're using.
Also streamlines that process as well, doesn't it? In terms of people don't have a big bang approach, change everything on day one. You can phase things in as and when you feel ready for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of the approach that we try and take as well, is go, look, it's almost like Mark said, almost like a cherry pick area. You can go, right, we want a little bit of adding this in there. We've got a toolkit where we've got some partnered third parties that we're with already, and people rarely take all of them. They'll take sort of some that match their requirements and maybe bring them in as they're sort of going. Also, the other reason is one of the more obvious ones is with GP going end of life. With it being Microsoft's recommended upgrade approach, Microsoft has done a lot of things in the background to make this as seamless as possible, not only for migrating, but for users who are coming from GP to BC in terms of learning. They've put some specific learning paths together to go GP to BC similarities. And they've also, like I said before, changed some of the core product of Business Central to make it look and feel more like Dynamics GP in places, to make that more familiar to people. So it is, and our experience of doing these migrations is GP users tend to pick up Business Central very quickly because of that similarity between the two applications. And yeah, the only thing I was going to mention there was around the automatic update. So Marco mentioned it before around biannual updates. So you get them as being a Business Central customer on the cloud. You don't have to manage that. You don't have to buy an upgrade. You don't have to change hardware or anything like that. Microsoft handles all that for you. And with that, you get new bits of functionality. So I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar around statistical accounts coming in. Now that just became available. As new regulatory things come in, we saw Making Tax Digital come in. That just became available in the product. There was no, we have to upgrade and buy the Making Tax Digital module. It just became available in the core product. And there's a big push at the minute with some of the sustainability stuff. That's all coming into core products in Business Central that you'll just have access to by just having Business Central in the cloud. There's no sort of secondary step to go, right now, we want to upgrade to the newest version of Business Central. That's all handled via Microsoft's lifecycle. And that also means, I mentioned at the beginning, I'll mention it again, things like Copilot wasn't available in Business Central, so it didn't exist 18 months ago. As it's coming to fruition, it's just coming to Business Central. So our customers who got an update at back end of last year just got Copilot available in their Business Central now and can utilize that free of charge. There's no additional cost. That just came into the core product. So there's some of the reasons why customers are sort of choosing to move across to Business Central from Dynamics GP. So the next point is, so the first point was why customers moving to Business Central, and the next point is, well, why with Advania? What can we offer in that space? Well, one of the first things, I imagine quite a lot of people on this webinar will recognise some of the faces here, but Kansi, who has been with the company for over 40 years now, and has been involved in almost all the GP implementations we've done, and he's our go-to person for the migration. He's our internal expert around the migration tool. So every GP to BC project he's involved with to some degree. Gavin Whitaker was a Dynamics GP consultant who migrated about 5 years ago to Business Central. So he really has a good understanding of the differences between the two products, some of the pain points between the two, and he's really helped design this migration path that we've got in terms of what are the things that GP customers are going to want to see in Dynamics Business Central, and that's shaped some of the third parties we've decided to use. And also some of the training paths that we've put together, because we've got first-hand experience and know what it's like to go from GP to BC, because we've got consultants here that have done that journey. And then the final one's Becky Payne. So she's our business application support team manager. So she'll be the person still ultimately dealing with support requests. So she knows a lot of our GP client base already. So knows a lot of the functionality they're using that we're replicating within Business Central. So it's a familiar face sort of all around. And what that does is allows us to understand our GP client base without having to go into really detailed scoping. We still go into a level of scoping, but Kansi knows the ins and outs of a lot of our clients already, and that can give us a bit of a head start in that conversation in terms of we know what sort of path we can go down with those clients. And like I mentioned before, we've developed then off the back of that some very specific third parties based on what are our GP customers using and we know Dynamics GP. So that the uniqueness of that is it's very rare when you're moving from one system to another that you've got an implementation partner that knows both. We've got Business Central and GP personnel and people that know both. So it helps us understand things a bit more when you start talking to us about smart lists, when you start talking to us about Nolan's, E1, some of those third parties. We know what that involves because we've implemented that for GP and we now implemented it for Business Central. So it gives us that sort of holistic view of what needs to happen between GP and BC migrations. Now, the other benefit of that is we've managed to put together a bit of a tailored migration strategy. So Mark mentioned at the beginning, again, there's a couple of ways you can migrate to Business Central. And our preferred option is to use the migration strategy outlined above. So what that typically involves is, first of all, we'll run a migration assessment. So what that involves is us taking your Dynamics GP database, run it through an assessment tool, and what that'll tell us straight off the bat quite quickly is what data it is you're using, what modules you're using, what third parties you've got installed. It'll tell us levels of data, your number of companies, and give us a real good overview of what it is you're doing. Now, what it'll also do is help point to us any areas where we're going to run into difficulties running the migration tool. So that might be some of your data needs cleansing or some of the data formatting's not quite right. And that basically will then give us the heads up when we go into more detailed scoping around some of the things we want to iron out. And then once we've done that, it's completely up to each individual customer. It can be a very hands-off approach at that point. The Advania will run our migration tools. So we've got a dual tool approach. So Microsoft got their official migration tool, which we use. And that is a tool that takes all your data from Dynamics GP, transforms it into Business Central data. So you will see your Dynamics GP in Business Central's format. Now, the benefit of that is, and the uniqueness of running the migration tool is you will get your historical data with that. So you typically, when moving from one ERP platform to another, lose detailed historical data. You'll get your opening balances and your closing balances into your old system, but you won't get the historical data behind it. Whereas the migration tool brings that across for you. So with that, you can say, Advania, you just do it. And we run the migration process. It'll bring across all your data, your opening balances, and you're essentially ready to go in GP. That's not an oversimplification. That is as simple as it can be. But then we also have our own migration tool, which is for some of the edge cases, things that people are using in GP that tool perhaps hasn't thought about, that again, we've built up over the last 5 years based on the migrations we've done to go, right, there's some bits here that we probably want to also include and bring them across. So we use both of those tools typically to then bring across your Dynamics GP into Business Central. Now with that, there's an element where you can get involved in that and say, look, we don't want to take it just as it is. We want to do some data cleansing first. We want to do some data stuff first. We want to do some changes. That's fine. And that can still go through the migration process when we're ready. Or it can be, we're happy with our GP. We want it almost to be lifted and shifted across. And as part of that conversation, we then go, right, well, what third parties, what extension add-ons do we want to include in that? So we've partnered with a couple of the really well-known Dynamics GP partners, such as Nolan's and E1, to bring across some of their traditional GP extensions that are now available into Business Central, and we can do almost like a lift and shift of their modular that was in GP into Business Central, whilst also looking with some of the more modern technologies such as OCR and AI. We've partnered with the likes of Continue and InsightWorks, and that's not an exhaustive list. We've got far more than that, but that's just to give you a flavor of the type of things we do. And they then get bolted onto your implementation to give you a Business Central at the end of it that should match the functionality you had in GP with obviously the enhancements you have within Business Central. What that strategy also allows us to do is take you from one system to another much quicker than you'd be able to traditionally by we're going from Sage to Business Central, we're going from from GP to NetSuite, because that migration path has been created by Microsoft where it'll handle all those translations for us. So typically you'd be pulling your data out, you'd be mapping it into data templates that match the source system. There's a lot of user error in that. You'd be preparing opening balances, make sure you knew what your closing balance was. The migration tool handles all of that for us. There's still an element of we get you to check it and sign it off, but that's the crux of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of manual effort there as well on internal teams to cleanse that data, translate everything across, and then all the testing and what have you from that point of view.
Yeah, and it's not your only option. We mentioned this before, that you can still go through that traditional re-implementation path, and we've done that plenty of times with GP clients as well. We've done everything from a complete re-implementation to a click and upgrade in we just handle it all, and it all goes via the migration path, and people just want to simply lift and shift a very simplistic GP database into BC. We can sort of do anything between there, but this is the favored strategy for the benefits it gives you around your historical data and the time it removes from you guys having to actually put some time and effort into preparing that, which you typically have to do in a more traditional implementation. Cool. So I will hand over to Marco now, who's going to jump in and show us a little bit of Business Central firsthand.
Super. Thank you for that, Ollie. That was a great introduction, and I think that really highlights some of the benefits of reasons for change, but also why Advania is possibly the right partner from that point of view, the level of experience that we have. Just going to talk around Dynamics Business Central initially, just very briefly. Just going to talk about the platform that it essentially sits on. So Business Central sits in the Azure cloud from this point of view. So that essentially gives you not only the security benefits that you already feel the benefit for with regards to Microsoft 365 and your other applications, but also the interoperability opportunities. Should have chosen a shorter word there, I think. Essentially, we can integrate with the existing applications such as Microsoft Teams, Excel, Word, Outlook, and we can really see the benefit here where we can reference data from Business Central, from our business application, but we can do that in different formats. So, typical one would be someone's wanting to make a mass change to data. Why not use Excel? We're already familiar with Excel. We can do formulas and calculations in Excel and then push that back into Business Central and make a mass change from that point of view. It's not something you necessarily give everybody access to, but for the trusted users, that's a really beneficial tool that saves a lot of time. Similarly, we want to integrate with our Outlook. We get emails and requests from clients, queries on documents. Why not reference that document directly in your emails rather than having a separate application to go to? And similarly with Teams, we may have an internal query, we're working together on an opportunity. Why not collaborate in Teams to do that from that point of view? The other tools that we have in the stack are developer tools. If you're of that mindset, we want to develop and enhance Business Central, you can absolutely do that, and we're more than happy to train you to be self-sufficient. And we are also on the end of a phone if you'd rather lean on our own expertise in that particular area as well. Already touched on the Power Platform, but again, just kind of reiterate, Power BI, native integration from that point of view. You can actually embed Power BI dashboards into the application itself, so you don't need to open up a separate screen. By all means, you can do that if you do want, but it's nice to kind of see that data in a single environment. Just on Power BI, actually, just one point on there, we can actually connect to multiple different data sources. So if you have got a reported requirement elsewhere in the business, Power BI can be a really beneficial tool there that you can pull that data from a different data set, but combine that with the Business Central data from your business application too. Some of our clients also do things with Power Apps to send out an app for people to put data and push that into Business Central and update information. Power Automate, again, is a tool that people tend to use from an automation perspective, that something happens in Business Central that automatically fires off a triggered action somewhere else in the system or somewhere else in the business. And we're also seeing the growing need for agents as well to streamline processes in system as well. But as I mentioned, all on the Azure database. So ultimately, from that perspective, you've got the security, multi-factor authentication, the management of data and local compliance and what have you is all taken care of from you as part of Microsoft's package. In terms of the requirements from a hardware perspective, you really just need an internet connection, a laptop. We can send you the minimum requirements from a browser perspective, but typically speaking, there's not really a requirement to have a particularly fast and reliable laptop from that point of view. So diving into the products, what I'm doing when I'm first logging in, you'll see the Business Central home screen from here. One thing to point out, I've set up a company in this particular instance. You can have multiple companies in the same environment. If you have a multi-company structure, you want to do group consolidation, intercompany transactions, those things can all be done as part of the same schema in this case. And we can also hop from one company to another, just using the option up at the top here, and we can hop into a different company, and you can set different color palettes so that you know which company you're working in at any given time. Now, bit of a generic demonstration for today, so my apologies, can't go into a great amount of detail just based on the time that we have. But this particular role center that I'm in is a finance manager, so everything's all finance orientated. You have a traditional menu structure at the top that you'd be familiar with if you've ever been on a website, pretty much. But ultimately, there's a series of departments and then functions within those departments. So your general journals, your charts of accounts, currency information, budgets, and things like that would all sit in there. You can then obviously do journals over here as well for different types of journals. You have your cash management option here as well, from receiving cash from customers, payments to suppliers, and that type of thing. And also cost accounting and fixed assets as well, are all part and parcel of the solution too. In terms of the home screen, you also have this little carousel that just goes through important information, headline information, if you will, and that can be relevant to that particular role. Something's happened in the system, just notify you of that from that perspective. We can also look at ongoing transactions as well. So I've got a series of tiles on the home screen here, and they can have conditional formatting against them that essentially says when the value gets to a certain threshold, we highlight that in either red, amber, or green status, just to illustrate to the user that something urgently needs their attention. They can click into the detail here for the overdue purchase document, and that's then going to take them through to a list view of all that transactional data. So not bombarding the user at first glance, but the data is always just a click away if you do need that from that point of view. A little bit further down, some of the other important things that we've got on here. So obviously we've mentioned the purchase documents, also have approvals built in system as well. So these can be built in Business Central. We can also leverage Power Automate as well for our own custom workflows from that point of view. You also have inbuilt emails as well. So if you want to send an email directly from the system, again, that can be sent directly from system, directly in the Business Central environment in this case. And we have also got the ability to pull in OCR documentation as well, as Ollie alluded to there. Typically speaking, our clients will lean on something like Continua to do that OCR recognition. But again, we're happy to have that discussion with you because everybody's different with regards to their requirements. A little bit further down, possibly not too relevant to the wider audience, but we also manage timesheets in system as well. So if you wanted to capture time and expenses for a particular project that you may be working on, that's a great opportunity to capture that information from here. We also have the chart of account structure in here as well, so I can keep an eye on my favorite account codes or ones that need my attention on the most regular basis. Just keeping an eye on those balances just to make sure that we are happy with those figures. Something instantly takes my attention, again, single click away, and I can get to that underlying data. Apologies, I just had a little view in there. So this is just showing me all of the transactional data from here. I'll come back to that option a little bit later on. That was actually our analyze function, which is a relatively new function in Business Central. So I'll just show you what we can do around that. On the right hand side, we also have our business performance, just a little reporting gauge in this case, or a graph, and that's ultimately just going to show me transactional data, top 5 customers in this case, but obviously there are alternative solutions and we can build reporting around your requirements. Then a little bit further down, I've also got my cash flow forecast in here. My apologies, that's just fallen asleep, but we'll just refresh that a second. So what that ultimately does is that looks through all of the transactional data in system, and that's then going to give me a view of my opening balances, and then when in time I'm expecting to make payments out of the system. Now there's quite a nice feature around that, is that ultimately your cash flow is typically driven by your payment terms with your customers and your suppliers. However, you can manipulate that using cash flow payment terms as well. So that's ultimately a little bit of contingency in there that you can add that in. One thing I haven't shown you yet, but I may come back to later on, is ultimately around those cash flow worksheets, which are essentially a suggestion by the system as to what should be on the cash flow forecast. Now, prior to that posting, you can always review that, and then you can submit it once you're happy with it if you want to edit anything prior to posting. On the right-hand side, we've also got a little reporting inbox, so no system will be complete without a reporting inbox of some description, but ultimately you can set a report to run on a scheduled basis on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. All of your regular reports will just drop into your inbox or groups of users' inboxes that they can then pick those up and go forward with those. The other thing that I mentioned was around Power BI. So I've just got a little Power BI dashboard here, and if I just expand this is just giving you a little bit of an idea how those different dashboards can be built, and ultimately you can display those in a rendered view in a single environment. So this could be looking at multiple different facets of the business, but consolidated onto a single display. By all means, you can run Power BI in isolation, but I find it really helpful that you can just have that reference data directly in the application. You're not hanging on different applications and slowing your computer down from that perspective. This particular view is just looking at some project-based work, so balances, remaining budgets, and total costs and revenue expected from that type of thing. We also have resource utilization as well, so this can look at my resources and their utilization based on their billable time, and that can give me a graphical view of that data over horizon with, again, conditional formatting in here just to kind of illustrate where's a bad month and where's a good month, maybe from that perspective. So that's something we tend to see a lot of our clients do lean on as part of the implementation process, just to replicate some of the reports, but also get some extra feature added benefits as they're going forward. If I just expand that screen there, just bear with me a second. If I expand that screen up there, that's going to take me up to the top. And from here, I'm ultimately able to come into a slightly different view. Just bear 1 second. So from here, if I just go into my quick actions, this then gives me the access to my existing transactions, but also create new transactions. So I can create new documents in system. I can also create a payment from here if I want to make a payment run out or a payment run from my customers. We can pull that in from that perspective. We can also run analysis views, and just going back to the reporting option in here, if I want to analyze the data, in this case, I'm analyzing the general ledger, I can do analysis by dimensions from here. Now, what we have are the different column displays and also the lines displays. So lines would be how you want to view the lines, how you want to consolidate them. And then your columns would typically be how do you want to compare data over certain periods in time or in different business units. These are actually leaning on dimensions, which are essentially similar to the segments that you may be using, but they're a lot more flexible in terms of what you can do and how you can create those, how you can analyze them, but also how you can streamline the chart of accounts. So just touching back to Ollie's point a little bit earlier on, we can lift and shift the data exactly as is, but now maybe a time where you really want to review that data and try and get some feature benefits going forward. If I just change this view in here just to show me the cost center and the GL account code, what I can do here, I've just changed the date horizon just so I get a little bit more data. But what this will ultimately show me is my total amounts for each of my different account codes, and I can spread that across different business areas in here or different departments. We can also look at that, based on various different criteria. So you'll have a different way of analyzing data, and as you'd expect, you can always export this data back to Excel, or you can click to the underlying data, and you can see all of the transaction details behind each transaction that you're seeing. So very good, very flexible from that perspective, and that's all accessible directly from the home screen. Some of the other things that you can do from here, we can do a create from here. So I can create a reminder letters. There's a standard reminder letters run that you can run letters directly from the system, all of the credit control functions that you may want, and then you can send those out, submit those from Business Central directly. The benefit that you have there is that ultimately that puts a timestamp on the account card so that everybody in the organization can see that somebody's chased some age debt. I can't guarantee the customer's going to pay it any quicker, but ultimately you can send the documentation out from the system from that point of view. The other thing, just looping back to reporting, is we also have inbuilt Excel-based reports. So from here, there's a series of templated ones, but you can write your own reports if you do want, or we can offer that as a consultancy service as part of the implementation program. If I click on the trial balance versus budget from here, you can look at various different account codes, between ranges, include, exclude, for example. You can also do a comparison versus budget. And you'll have to excuse me, we haven't put this year's budget in place yet, but we're still working on that one. If I just click on download, what that's then going to do is drop that into an Excel form for me. And ultimately, from this perspective, I can then view that data in an Excel format. But it's really nicely pre-templated. So it's a start for 10. It gives you something to work with initially, but then you can enhance that and further format some of the data so that you can then report on that going forward. And it's a little bit easier to get to the detail. So that's now showing me my chart of account structure over on the left-hand side. You see each of the net change balances, and you also see the budget balances as well. So you can then do your comparisons here. On the right-hand side, that's taking my two global dimensions, which again are very similar to those segments that you have within GP. You have your prefix and your suffix ultimately. And what this is going to do is to allow me to slice and dice between multiple different companies and also those different departments that I mentioned a little bit earlier on. So you can hone in on that data. I've not got the best demo data, I will be honest, but if I want to see transactions by company A or by company B, for example, or you can do combinations using these nice little slicers, hitting control on my keyboard, just release that, and then that shows me the transactional data. The other thing to mention is we also have account category codes in here. I should make this a little bit bigger, but ultimately we can categorize our accounts, and then we can select those on here as well. So if I want to look at my assets, for example, or I want to look at cash, for example, I can just select the cash accounts from here, and it shows me the detail behind each of those different balances and the budgeted figures too. So that's how you can do the Excel-based reporting. We'll come back to Excel a little bit later on, but I just want to kind of touch that off initially, just kind of show you that. Already mentioned about the cash flow forecast. So the cash flow forecast runs via a worksheet. If I just come back to the cash flow forecast. So the cash flow forecast essentially has this worksheet behind it. And from here, this is where it's going to make a suggestion to suggest lines. And you've got a series of toggles that you can turn on. What do I want to include in my cash flow forecast? And they're really simple, just to put those elements in or take them out if you don't want them. Just turn everything on for now. And what that's going to do is just to run through and make a suggestion for each of those lines. Just going to say it while I can see it on screen, but you can also include the budget values in here as well. So if you wanted some budgeted figures, they can also form part of your cash flow forecast too. Now, once I've run that, we have the source document, where that's come from, the receivables accounts, the payables, and a little bit further down, some of your tax and so on from the bottom down here. As I mentioned, you can manipulate this. So if I select a line and I want to insert, I can just click on here, and that's then going to take me through to add in a new line from here. I could add a new line on there and start to work with that to include something that wasn't on the cash flow forecast from that perspective. Again, if I wanted to delete, I can either delete individually, or I can use Shift on my keyboard, and then I can just select multiple lines in here, and then I can go ahead and delete those all in a mass routine from here. So really flexible and really easy to use. Hopefully it's coming across that it's quite intuitive and easy to navigate from that point of view. The biggest thing with any system migration is always going to be your terminology and trying to find the things that you do need. But there is a helpful tell me tool up at the top here. So if you are looking for something that you can't find, such as general journals, you can just add that in here. And if you want, you can then bookmark that, so that's instantly available for you, so that you can find that going forward. You don't have to search for it every time. Just going to register this now, and that's then going to go off, and it's going to post those cash flow forecast lines to my cash flow forecast back on the home screen, so that updates in there, and we're off and we're ready to go on with the next thing that we need to do. Just one other thing that I'll just touch on here is just around the personalization. So in terms of the role centers, they're highly configurable, as we mentioned in the presentation. But from here, if I go into the personalized mode, you'll notice there are some elements to the screen that are now appearing that weren't previously available. So in that particular case, if I want to see that element all the time, I can opt to show that if I want, and that will then add that graph to my dashboard on a regular basis, so I can always see that. You'll notice up at the top as well, I can select any of the functions in here. So maybe we're not using, I don't know, maybe we're not using intercompany dimensions, for example. I could just say, actually, we don't want to see that. So I could hide that element from the screen. That takes that into grayscale and italic. And now when I come out of the edit mode, that essentially disappears from my screen. So just because it's gone doesn't mean it's gone for good and I can never get it back. I can always revert back to the standard. But it's really nice and flexible from that point of view, that we can clean up the screens and we can just focus on what we need to work on and take away some of that noise away from the screens. And that personalized mode is available throughout the system. Whether you're on a list of my customers, for example, I could edit the information that we're seeing on here. And the same, if I was in the customer card itself, I can hide any of the elements that we have in here. So we really have a lot of flexibility around personalizing our screens.
It's just worth mentioning on that as well, Marco, that that's available at either an end user, so a user can personalize themselves, can't they? Or we can do it at like a global administrator level, so you can get really defined with how you want these screens to look. That you could go, the finance team are going to have this screen, but then someone within the finance team could then personalize it further. So the idea behind Business Central is you do customize it to look exactly as you want. So in demos and in the early days, you'll see quite a busy interface, but you can really streamline that down to be sort of just what you want to see.
So that's always a contentious topic. Some people want the users to have the permissions to make them with those changes. Other people absolutely not. Lock it down.
Yeah.
So Business Central can be scaled either way. There's no issues around that from that perspective. Okay, so first point I'm going to talk about Copilot for today. So if I just come into to look at some of the features, I'm just going to look for my general ledger entries page. So from here, again, I'm using the tell me function there to bring that transactional data in from this point of view. Now, it's bringing in a lot of data from here, and all of the data in Business Central sits in a series of list views. And you'll notice that there's transactional data in here, a little bit of detail, column headings, and what have you. Looks very much like Excel, so it's familiar look and feel for everybody. Again, we've got the personalized function if you want to move the columns around, resequence them, set freeze panes and things like that. That's all part and parcel of it. On the right-hand side, you have an information panel that shows you details about the transaction that you've highlighted in this case. So that limits the number of clicks that you need, and you see the disbursement of the accounts in this particular case, and you can drill into the detail behind that. But what I just wanted to show you just from this particular view is the Copilot function. So the little Copilot icon just sits at the top of most of the screens in Business Central, and this gives you the ability to analyze data in here. So just kind of show you what that can essentially do. If I want to look at the details behind this particular account, I can come in and I can just create my own search if I want. So if I want to group this by company, for example, so I'm just going to choose group by company and then click generate. There are some pre-templated options in there as well. You can choose from a predetermined list that's already in Copilot. But what this goes off and does is to analyze that data how I've suggested it. So now it's showing me transaction details behind company A, company C, and then B. I don't know why I sequenced it that way, but there we go. If I just expand that, we can then see the details behind each of those different document numbers in there. If I wanted to expand on that a little bit further, absolutely I can do. So if I want to analyze and say, let's say group by company, then by account number. So what this is going to do is do a duplicate there. So it's going to look at, you know, an initial grouping, and then it's going to look a little bit further behind that. So we're then going to look into company A. We're then going to look at each of our different account codes. Firstly, you see the number of transactions, and then when you click through, you then see the detail behind those transactions. The other thing that you can do in here, so I'm not seeing a value in this particular view, is change this to pivot mode, and then it shows you very much like a pivot table, each of the different balances for each of those different accounts. You'll notice up at the top, I've got various different views, so I can create multiple different views, and I can add, again, very similar to Excel, a different view, a different way of analyzing those different transactions. Because I've come into this particular window, I can always come back just by clicking on leave in this case, and that takes me straight back to the view of that data in here. So we don't have the need to take things out to separate systems, export into Excel to format and to group things. You can do that directly in system. And again, Copilot makes that life a little bit easier to do that. The other area where Copilot comes in really, really useful for most of our customers is around the bank account reconciliation. So if I just come to tasks, and if I come into bank account reconciliation, we'll obviously talk a little bit around getting the data in the system, but ultimately your options are, to import the bank statement, download a file from the bank, import that to Business Central, and we can configure that file so that it comes in and matches for you automatically. We can also connect to the banks as well, and we mentioned earlier on around Nolan bank feeds. So ultimately that can be something that a lot of our clients will choose to use, and that will then connect to your bank directly, connect to the bank, and pull in the transactional detail. On the left-hand side, you see the transactional detail from the bank statement. You also see Business Central transaction details in here too. And what Copilot can do is allow you to reconcile using Copilot. You have your traditional match manually where you can point and click and match those transactions. You can match within date tolerances. But if I just choose Copilot, that's going to go off and make a suggestion for me as to which lines it can match in this case. And you'll notice here that it's matched 17 of the 18 lines. And if I just want to click into the detail there, that's then going to take me through and show me where it's made that suggestion. So everything highlighted in green has been reconciled and that's been matched okay. However, for the lines that haven't been selected correctly, it's going to show me that in black. So I can see straight away there's a charge here from the bank that hasn't been included. If I want to transfer that to a general journal, I can do that right while I'm in here. So I haven't got to come out of there and go off and do anything else. I can come in here, right now, and update that data. I'm just going to put in the nominal code that I want to select. Choose that one from here, just check that the balances match, and I'm all happy with everything on the lines. Again, you'll have to excuse the number of columns that I have in here. As Ollie mentioned, our demo systems have everything turned on. We can scale these right back so that you don't have so many options available. Once you're happy, we're just going to go off and post that journal from here, and that goes off and we're ready to go from there. So that's around streamlining that process. I'll just discard that for now. Go back out there for a second. So the next thing I'm just going to show you is just around the Teams integration. So I've mentioned Copilot, just going to mention Teams next. So Teams can be used throughout the system to publish data, but also query transactions. If I just show you one example, let's take, for example, I'm in a customer's account and the customer's got a query on one of their invoices. I'll just come into their balances here, and then we see all of the invoices here. So if I want to click into an individual invoice and look at the detail behind it, if I just click on Show Document, that's then going to take me through to the document from here. What we always have, which is really helpful at the header of the document here, is I can share this to Teams. Now, if I wanted to share this with one of my colleagues, I can open up a Teams chat directly from the system here. I haven't got to go out into Teams. By all means, I can do, but this just saves me a little bit of time. And it's got a little message in there pre-written for me. You know, maybe there's a customer querying. Is it easy? If I just click share on there now, that's then going to pop up a Teams chat to my colleague. The nice thing that you have with that is that that user that I've shared that piece of information with doesn't have to be a Business Central user. They can always reference that data directly from their Teams account. So if I just show you how that would look, is if I just come into my Teams in this window and I just come to that Teams chat. So you'll see from here that that's the query that I've just sent across to Nikki. So that's how Nikki would see that message. And if I click on that document, that can then take your colleagues through to that individual transaction. What happens initially is that when you open this document, it's in read-only format. I can't do anything with it, can't change anything. It's just locked down. But if the user has the permission, they could then edit this document and make changes to it. Now, this is a posted invoice in this case, and Nikki doesn't have access. So that's just locked down for Nikki in that particular case. But we can also publish data from Business Central to our Teams. So if I just come into my Teams channels over on the left-hand side here, what we have is a Business Central Teams channel. And from here, we can then publish some of the data that lives in Business Central directly into Teams. You can choose which company this is going to come from. So in this case, it's from our demo database, show me all of the customers, and I can slice and dice this directly from my email. So if I wanted to say, show me all the customers with a balance on their account, more than 0, I can analyze that from directly in my Teams. I don't need to come to Business Central to do that. If that's helpful, I can save that, and that can be one of my daily reports, for example. You can do combinations of filters, and that's a really helpful way of getting to that data from Teams and not necessarily in Business Central direct. You've also got some of your analysis views in here as well. So if you wanted to do some of those reportings, again, you can do that in Teams. You don't need to come to Business Central to do that. Okay, that was around there. Other element I'm just going to show just while I'm in the customers list is in terms of the list of data here, we can actually use Excel to cleanse some of our data. So again, if I want to filter some of this data, I can do. What I'm just going to do here, though, just as a really quick example, I'm actually just going to just make some changes to data in this particular list. So from this perspective, if I want to see a list of all of those customers that I had in Business Central, it's actually logging me in using the same account that I had for my Business Central in Excel in this particular case. And based on the permissions that you have, not everybody should have access to this. However, for the trusted individuals, this is a real time saver for wanting to make mass changes to the database. So if I wanted to update a customer's name and put my name at the end of there, I could do that if I wanted. Could also put the customer on stop if I want. I can block them from shipping, I can block them from invoice, or I can block them from all transactions. If I want to copy that formula down, I can block a few customers at the same time. Once I'm happy, I can just publish that data back to Business Central. Now that's made a few changes in there. It's changed the name of a customer. It's put 5 customers on stop simultaneously. If I want to reference that data back in Business Central, absolutely I can. If I just come in here and just refresh my list, that's then going to show me the customer with a new name. If I click on there, you then see this customer's been shipped. And we also have the ability to make that change back in Business Central and then push that back to the Excel document as well from that point of view. So really helpful to make those changes on a mass routine. Typically speaking, that tends to get used for making mass pricing changes and things like that, as we are living in a bit of a volatile world at the minute, but that would be where you would manage that. The other tool that gets really heavily used is our Outlook integration. So if I come to my Outlook, what I'm going to do here is just reference back some of the data that sits in Business Central. So for the users that spend most of their time in an Outlook rather than Business Central, maybe you're a credit controller and you want to access data in Business Central, just click into open the email. What this can do is validate the contact's email address. Do they match a contact in the database? And also, what's the text on the body of the email? So in this case, it scraped the text on the body of the email and looked for an invoice number with a matching invoice number for that particular customer. So there's a matching process that goes on there. If everything matches, you can click on a hyperlink here. That takes you straight through to that document directly in your emails. You don't need to come into Business Central to do this. You can see the details of the quote or the order number in this case, and also the item that the customer bought, pricing information, payment dates, and what have you from that perspective. If you want, you can even send an email directly to the customer from this window here. Pre-templates, you can edit it before you send, but off it goes with all your letterhead and everything, and it just provides the extra level of service whilst also saving yourselves time with regards to locating that transaction. What we can also do, as it's a demo, that's always a perfect customer. They always give me the correct number, as you can imagine. But if I don't have the correct invoice number, I can actually just do a blanket lookup on the customer's account. So if I look on the right-hand side here, you can see the details behind that particular account. A little bit further down, you then see the transactional data on that account too. So really good and really informative information from here. Maybe while I'm dealing with this particular client, I also want to understand, are they a good customer? Do they always pay on time? Do they never pay on time? Maybe my approach is slightly different just based on that informative information. Now, in my case, I came from Business Central to Outlook. It doesn't have to be the case. You can come directly into Outlook. You can spend all your time in Outlook specifically. The other thing to mention is that I'm on a cloud instance of Outlook. It also works exactly the same on the desktop version as well. I just have 2 accounts, which is why I'm on this particular display. Okay, so final thing I'm just going to cover off there. I'm a little bit behind on time, so my apologies there. Just regards the workflow routines that we have set up. So we've got some workflows in the system. So if I come to my workflows, you see we have some pre-templated solutions around order types, invoice types, and also credit limit changes and what have you from this perspective. What we can do is trigger the system that when an action happens in Business Central, something happens or there's an approval that's required. Now, it's a very simple one in this particular case. I can just filter that to order types in this case for purchase orders and against a particular supplier. You can also do ranges as well. So if you wanted to do supplier 30,000 and also supplier 20,000, you can add multiple options in here as well if you want. We can also choose what the balance is going to be. So up to the value of £4,999. We don't need to approve that. It can just go straight through. But anything above, we want to stop that and hold that for an approval process. We have to enable this particular process to go through, and that will stop those transactions going across as long as it's outside of the tolerances. If I just come to my purchase order, easy, click into there. What I'm going to do now, just create a purchase order from that particular supplier. So we're going to pop in the relevant supplier, and we're going to pop in the relevant item. Okay, so if I choose 4 of this particular item, handily it's £4,000. Sorry, it's £1,000. It adds up to £4,000 in this case. If I want to release this document, you'll notice there's a status over here. If I'm allowed to send this on to the supplier, it will let me release that. If I change the quantity and make that 5, that's then going to stop me from sending that to supplier. And we hit this approval workflow from here. Now, again, all you need to do is request approval from the header, and that has a dedicated workflow behind the scenes to choose the relevant approver in sequence from that perspective. The other thing you may notice on here as well is that we also have automate at the top of this ribbon as well. And that has been on every one of the pages. It just happens that I'm on this particular page at this moment in time. But again, what we can do here is create approval workflows or triggers directly in Power Automate from here. Now, I've actually been doing one behind the scenes that you may have not noticed, and I've actually got a trigger that alerts a Teams channel, very similar to the Teams message that we had. We can update a Teams channel whenever a customer's been blocked. So you notice I have an unread message here. If I click into there, we can actually notify a Teams channel from here that that particular customer has been put on stop. And again, if I want the details, just click on the details tab. And again, that's going to open up Business Central for me, and I can see that particular customer's details. I can see they're significantly over their credit limit. And again, if I have the permission, I can edit this, and I could choose to take them off stop. However, because they're so far over, I might actually make it that one step further from this point of view. Okay, so those were the elements that I wanted to cover as part of the demonstration for today. I think the important thing really is obviously that we are looking to navigate a path from GP ultimately through to Business Central, and Microsoft do help you along the way with that particular process. And as Oliver's already mentioned in there, we have got a dedicated path to take you from GP through to BC, but also Microsoft do also support us with funded engagements with our clients so that we can actually establish their requirements, understand a little bit about what their current setup is, but also work on that path to take you from point A through to point B. So what we initially do is a deep dive understanding session with yourselves to understand about the requirements. We then identify some of the risks, some of the key stakeholders, and try and get you along that path from point A through to point B. And then from the back of there, we'll document everything, and ultimately we'll work out a plan of getting you onto a cloud-based product and also giving you benefits along the way. And the little process flow just down here just shows you through that relevant process. A little bit further down, just kind of go in and hone in on a little bit of detail on these particular elements. So from here, the initial phase would be the business process mapping, just understanding your requirements, what are your key objectives for moving to the cloud, and also a high-level assessment of some of the new capabilities and enhancements that are in Business Central, taking advantage of things like Copilot, Power Automate, and Power Apps that could be beneficial to yourselves. We also have a high-level view of the customizations that you have. Using the assessment tool, we can understand some of the key risks or stopping points that we need to understand prior to taking the opportunity any further. In terms of a technical evaluation, we also review database sizes, schema sizes, number of transactions that you put in through the system, and we'll identify the best route forward to get you onto that cloud-based product. And in terms of ourselves, obviously, you've got to get to know Advania. Hopefully, you already know your account managers anyway. But if there are any issues, we have also got a generic SMB account management email address that you can email, and we'll point you in the right direction. But that really is the next point of action from ourselves. But ultimately, if you are interested in speaking more a little bit about Business Central, maybe having a deeper dive session into the functionality, the like-for-like comparisons to GP, we're more than happy to engage in those processes. Ollie, have you seen any questions in the chat?
Apologies, I was muted. Yes, we've had some come through. So I don't mind box a couple of these off as they've sort of popped through.
Yeah.
And there's someone here that we can pick up with people sort of after session as well, something that we perhaps need a little bit more context around. But one of the ones which is quite commonly asked around cloud-based implementations and Business Central on the cloud is, how does backup retention policy and all that work? and how manageable is that? How much of that do Microsoft manage? How much of that is the customer managing? Well, Microsoft manages that is the short answer to it. But you do have the ability to pull your own backups down if you want to have that sort of extra peace of mind and hold them locally. But Microsoft manages that backup routine. And it's all maintained in the back end. We don't see it, but it's an Azure SQL service basically, with all disaster recovery and business continuity wrapped around that as part of like a promise within that. And they hold those backups for 30 days. So the backup retention of that is 30 days. And you have the ability yourself to restore that by your, well, the relevant people do internally to go into your database backups and restore back to a point in time. It's also worth mentioning off the back of that around your environments that you do get with Business Central production and 3 sandboxes, all included in your subscription cost for no extra charge. So within that, what's quite common is sometimes people restore a production to a sandbox environment and do that first rather than restoring directly to a production. Then you do have the options then to move from sandbox to production, stuff like that. So it's something that is handled by Microsoft, and all of our customers are using that. Very few, like I said, yeah, I've got the option if you want to download your backups manually, install them somewhere you could, but we don't have many doing that. They mainly sort of lean on the Microsoft piece.
Yeah, and I suppose from that licensing perspective, all of the database sizes and what have you, that's all taken care of as part of the license fee. So the different types of license that you would have would ultimately be Essentials user or premium user. Typically speaking, GP customers tend to be Essential users. That gives you all the functionality that we've gone through today. From our perspective, with regards to t-shirt sizing, if you will, ultimately we need to define what the requirements are, the different functional areas of the system. If you grow and you do new things, or you need to add in new bits and pieces such as fixed assets, that's just a training exercise then. It's not a re-implementation or a change in your license cost. We also have team member licenses as well, which are more for approvals, perspectives, and also read-only users, so you can limit the cost of users from that perspective.
Yeah, and scalability is a really good one to mention there in terms from users. Like, yeah, Business Central, you get an environment size, but it can scale. You can buy additional size to it. We have very few people that are hitting that limit, but it is possible if you ever need to scale that up and down, you can. Microsoft give you that functionality and that ability to be able to do that in terms of purchasing more storage. Like Mark said, you do get additional storage with more users you add as well, so it sort of organically grows as you grow, but you can specifically say, I want to buy some additional storage against my database. But like I said, it's very rare that we have anyone that needs to do that, because there's things we can run in Business Central to clear down certain tables around like changelog and stuff to keep that environment within a manageable size. One of the other ones here was around users, so user management in sort of Business Central. So it is, as Marco was showing you there, he was going between like Outlook, Teams, Business Central. He wasn't having to re-authenticate because that's all via Entra, or Azure AD as it formerly called. It's all via that. So that piggybacks off your MFA. So if you're signed to Outlook with MFA, it'll do the same within Business Central. Users are managed via Entra, so that's where they get signed their license, and then they get pulled into Business Central. So as an administrator, you're managing all your users in the Microsoft stack via that same area, and Business Central taps into that, and then you go in BC and pull that through. And then within Business Central, you've got that additional layer then of going. I also want to add in some permissions again here from Business Central, and it can inherit them now from security groups in Microsoft 365. But if not, you can set those permissions into Business Central on their own as well within there. So you've got like 2 layers of doing that, but it's not a separate login process for Business Central. It just inherits what you're using for Microsoft 365. So that does give you that additional peace of mind that it's secure. You've got MFA against it. Anything you've got set for people to be able to access will be the same in Business Central.
Security is always a hot topic, isn't it? And it only gets hotter and hotter as time goes by. But yeah, it's important that it's obviously secure, which obviously Microsoft take care of that as part of the Azure Active Directory, as Ollie's already alluded to there.
Cool. Well, I know we're coming up to time. So if there's any other questions, I guess people can either pick it up with their AMs, email their AMs directly, and they'll probably come our way anyway. Or if there's anything else people want to submit in the Q&A bit, I can see some in here that we can sort of reply to offline. But feel free, and we'll come back to you on those things.
Super. Thank you everybody for your time today. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a great day.
Cheers, guys. Bye.